Hey guys, it's me. Sorry I'm not there today. I went ahead and pre-recorded myself walking you through our lesson so that hopefully you don't have many questions and you don't need to ask the sub for major assistance. Our clear target for today says that today we will revisit the most dangerous game so that we can complete an evidence chart as a pre-writing activity. We'll know we've got it when we can develop a thesis or claim statement. So let's go ahead and revisit the most dangerous game. What exactly was the short story about? Well, from what you remember, it's about a renowned hunter named Sanger Rainsford who fell overboard from a yacht in the Caribbean Sea and ended up on an island with the Russian expatriate General Zaroff. Rainsford quickly learned about Zaroff's new hunting quarry before, in fact, becoming prey himself. The two ended up having to play a life and death game that resulted in only one survivor, who, of course, we realized to be Rainsford. So hopefully by now, your substitute teacher had already passed out copies of the evidence chart. If not, now would be a really great time to raise your hand and politely ask that he or she do so. The directions on your evidence chart tell you to use this chart to identify relevant evidence that will help you to create an argumentative essay about the most dangerous game. So really quick, let me talk to you a little bit about this, because I know you probably have wide eyes and you're thinking, what the heck is she talking about, an argumentative essay? I really haven't given you a lot of insight into the fact that you're going to be writing an essay. I've kind of kept it hush-hush for no major reason at all. You are, in fact, going to be writing an argumentative essay, and because I haven't given you the topic and I haven't given you the prompt, the essay that you choose to collect today needs to be very relevant to each heading and each topic, and you need to have very thorough explanations that match up with your evidence. If you don't, you're going to be in a lot of trouble come Tuesday when you have to meet up with a group and share your evidence. So let's go ahead and look at the first row. The very top row on the left side, the very first heading should say, evidence that Zaroff considers himself civilized. So here you're looking for specific textual evidence that General Zaroff considers himself civilized. So this is probably going to be in the first part of the text when he's talking about how great he is and how, God blessed him and the world was built for the strong, not the weak. I'm kind of giving you a lot of hints here. On the right side, it says explanation of how the evidence supports the idea that Zaroff considers himself civilized. So here's actually where you're going to form your explanations, and you're going to be able to elaborate on what your evidence means and how it supports that idea. So let's go ahead and do the first one together. Okay, I cheated a little bit. I already put a quote in that column for you, so let's look at it. Notice that the one I picked said, like all his race, a bit of a savage. When we did our prejudice activity, we sort of talked about what prejudice looked like and how General Zaroff was very prejudicial, in his actions. So for that piece of evidence, notice I didn't just sort of plop a quote in that column. I tried to create a complete sentence. If you're able to do that, which you should be able to do, I would really love to see that because it just makes your evidence look pretty well-rounded and it makes more sense. So for that piece of evidence, it specifically says Zaroff describes his servant Ivan as, quote unquote, like all his race, a bit of a savage. So with our explanation, I have to explain how that particular quote shows that Zaroff considers himself civilized. And in that case, I wrote down, if Ivan is a savage, then by contrast, Zaroff must see himself as more civilized. So again, that comment that General Zaroff made about Ivan really demonstrated that he thought he was kind of beneath him and that he was better. Let's go ahead and do one more just to make sure that you have it complete. The next column, or the next row, says evidence that Rainsford considers Zaroff civilized. I'm pretty sure this is on the back of your first page. You might want to double check. On the other side, it says explanation of how the evidence supports the idea that Rainsford considers Zaroff civilized. So be very careful. The first thing we were talking about was about General Zaroff being civilized and thinking that he was civilized, but now we're actually kind of switching gears and we're looking at how Rainsford sees General Zaroff. The piece of evidence that I selected for that says a cultivated voice and the face of an aristocrat. And I found that in paragraph 44. For my entire piece of evidence, I created the complete sentence that said Zaroff has a cultivated voice and the face of an aristocrat. To me, that demonstrates Rainsford considers Zaroff civilized, because that's pretty much what what Rainsford said about him. Rainsford said, hey, things I noticed about him were the fact that A, he had a cultivated voice, meaning he had a very rich voice. He seemed cultured. Remember, we talked about how he said he was a cosmopolite. And then he had the face of an aristocrat. And we know that aristocrats are pretty much royalty. They have a lot of wealth, that kind of thing. For my explanation, I said Rainsford's first impression of Zaroff demonstrates that Rainsford sees the general as a member of a superior class, which is something we've all talked about in class anyways. Rainsford did have this very first impression of kind of being an awestruck. He was impressed with the general and how he treated him and how he sort of came about. And obviously we know that that impression started to fade a little bit, but that right there proved that Rainsford considered Zaroff to be civilized in the beginning. Before you get started, there are two things that I want you to keep in mind, and these two things are two of the biggest ideas and key understandings of the Most Dangerous Game. The first one is the fact that all animals have a basic instinct for survival. We barely touched this topic in class with question, I think it was question 6 maybe, where we talked about how humans have civilized exteriors, but we have these animalistic impulses, and that goes with the second big idea of the Most Dangerous Game, and that would be that the animalistic impulses of humans lurk shallowly beneath our civilized exteriors. And I noticed that I forgot to put that on the PowerPoint slide. So these two big ideas and key understandings really make up the entirety of this text. It's all about how, when we're pushed into a corner, we're forced to kind of deal with this fight or flight complex. And so you have to keep that in mind as you're going through and filling out this evidence chart. Do these pieces of evidence support these two claims? Yes or no? All right, before I let you go, just to kind of recap with you, the directions on your evidence chart say that you're using this evidence to help you create an argumentative essay about the Most Dangerous Game. So you're going through, you're identifying pieces of evidence, and then you're coming up with very thorough explanations. Every single thing on your chart should be written in complete sentences. I'm not going to waste your time much longer. I've already wasted almost 8 minutes or so. I want you to have the whole class period to be able to find relevant pieces of evidence. I do expect probably 3 to 4 for each row, each column, but also pace yourself. If you notice that you're taking too much time trying to find relevant evidence and you're not going to get the whole thing done, then you need to skip some of it and move on to where you at least have 1 or 2. When you have completed your evidence chart, what I'd like for you to do very lastly, I know I'm giving it to you ahead of time, but at the very, very end, I'd like for you to read the prompt below. After you've read this prompt, I want for you to create what you would determine to be either a thesis or a claim at the bottom of your evidence chart. And it should be pretty recognizable because you know the difference between a thesis or a claim. So make sure that you're identifying, are you writing a thesis or are you writing a claim? And of course it has to be 3 parts. You know the deal. All right, if you have any questions, make sure to raise your hand. Good luck. See you guys on Monday.